This is the part 7 tutorial on PrestaShop creating a module from scratch, which is on retrieving, changing and deleting information. So this is going to focus on storing information for your module inside the database used for PrestaShop with the tables we created in the previous tutorial, and doing 4 things with the table. One is adding information to the table. So with whether you're using this on the client side or the admin side for someone entering information, and then that information being stored to be able to be used later as part of your module, updating that information so if there's any changes that you can keep the information you've already got but modify the changes, delete information, so if there's anything that doesn't need to be there or is for whatever reason outdated and no longer needs to be stored, and getting information. So when you want your module to show information that's stored in the table, to have a function that can draw out the information you need and shown to be whoever needs it. So I'm going to go through creating 4 different functions for a module and the module we've been working on, but I'm going to be using the block link table. So by default with PrestaShop you get two tables for a module called block link, and you can see I've already been modifying this one. I'm just going to delete everything from there so we start from scratch. So these 2 tables are now empty, and we're going to be using these in the module. Reason being, rather than using a table we created last time, is because we didn't actually design what information was going to be stored in there as such, because it only had 2 columns. So I'm going to be covering designing tables in another tutorial, but for now we're just going to use a simple table that's been well organized and fit for a specific purpose. So for starters, we just need to go into the main file, so the main module file, which is the name of the module.php, and we're going to create 4 functions, and all of these functions, we're not going to deal with the forms for people being able to interact. These functions are going to be automated just to show that they work. I'm also going to cover forms in another tutorial, but this is just going to show that we have functions for dealing with all these interactions of information, but showing them automated so we get the idea that they work and what possibilities we can have inside the module with these functions. So first function is by code adding the public keyword in front of the function. Since it's inside a class, we want to use this across any part of the module or possibly another module. So public function, and because the block link module deals with links, we'll just call it get links. So that's one function. And the next one we're going to deal with is adding information, so just call that add link. Then the next one is going to be update link. So and the next one's going to be delete link. So these are our 4 functions. We just need to add some code from now. So we'll start off with get links, and the first thing we're going to do is, once we've tabbed in, just organising the code, we'll add the first variable, which is result equals array. So this is going to be result is the return value of this function, and because this is going to be returning information for the specified links or all the links, it's going to be arranged in a array object. So I'm just going to put a comment under here for get ID and URL, because that's what we're going to be looking for in the table. And now we're just going to write a DB query. So we're going to combine this with an if statement, so if it fails, we know there's either something wrong with the SQL we've wrote for this function, or there's no records in the table. So DB get instance. This is how we interact with the PrestaShop database through modules. So DB get instance execute S. And execute S, I believe, is the function for returning arrays. In PrestaShop, you'd normally use just execute for a single piece of information or a single row of information. And inside here, we're just going to do a select query. So I'm just going to look at the different tables, because we're dealing with, the different columns, sorry, because we're dealing with two tables, so we need to know what columns we're retrieving information from. So this one would be ID link URL new window for getting information from this table. So just go back to Smoltron and enter that in. So select ID link URL new underscore window. Oops. From. And then in this part, we're just going to put the DB prefix, which, if I just go back to the tables, you'll notice all these, when you first set up PrestaShop, it asks you for a prefix, which is the prefix you have for your tables, so you can identify them uniquely. And by default, this is PS underscore, so you can see the actual name of the columns always precedes with a prefix. So we have to use that prefix. And instead of just writing PS underscore, it could be different depending on what prefix people have picked. So we need to do that automatically by using the a constant defined in PrestaShop. That's always going to be the right prefix, which is just DB prefix. And then we need to add the name of the module. Now you can do this by doing this name, but because we're dealing with a different table from a different module, we're just going to use the name of the module, which is perfectly fine. So just follow that by a little bit of custom code here. So int, which stands for integer, and we're just going to get in this query we're going to use a configuration variable. I'll explain this in a moment. Configuration get PS block link order way. And then basically in the same statement tell MySQL how to order the results, so how we want them arranged. So, whoops. So if this query fails, we want to return false, which tells your module that basically the getting the information for the links failed. And this little bit I put here is just getting some information from the configuration on where exactly we are sorry, I've got a bit blank on that one. I'll come back to that one later. So just underneath this we're going to put some more code in for returning the links once they're in an array object, because the links, if this function doesn't fail, then links becomes an array object with all the returned rows of results from the query. So we're going to have to separate the array, which is returned, into separate variables, and then basically list them down separately into a HTML document, which will be inside the display form function. So this is here, like at the moment you can see we've got this HTML, which, if I just go back to the admin panel, it just shows this at the minute. But once we have this function working properly, we can call it in the display form function. So we can just add some code just around about there, and we can get it to list all the different links just below in another box like this yellow one, just below with all the results. So just set a number to be used in a for each loop. So in a for loop normally you'll have like a number that keeps getting incremented to count through basically a numbering system to count through different results. But because we're using for each loop, we need to have a automatic numbering system that goes through without being in the actual declarement. So for each links as link, so I'm going to use the result variable, but we're going to fill it with the results from the links array, because this result array is empty at the minute and the links array holds the information. And this result array is also going to have the kind of arrangement of how we access the information. So it's each link is going to have its own array number in the result, and then that's going to have subarrays with the different properties. So we know the different properties are ID, URL, and new window simply from what we typed in the SQL code. So just copy that into these subarrays. So ID, URL, and new window. And we've just got to tell this for each function that each of these parts of the result array equal a matching result inside the links array. So we're basically just copying every bit of information from the links array that's been cut down in this function into the result array. So ID, because these are named slightly differently apart from URL, because you can see in the SQL statement we've got underscores instead of camel case. So with new window you've got an underscore in between the two words rather than the start of the second word being capitalised. So we just need to point out those differences and make sure we're naming them correctly when we're referencing the other variables. So and now that we have them in the result array, we just need to add another function to access the second table that this module has. So if we go back into phpMyAdmin, you can see we have block link lang, and if I click on that, this basically holds the translations of each different link depending on language. So this relies on the first table, but it just takes the ID of a link and then provides its own ID for the language to designate what this text variable is, which language this is applicable to. So an example of this would be, say we have a link to Google, then in the text field we'd just add Google as an English translation, and if there was a possibility that Google would be called a different name in another country or another language, then we'd be able to add that and be able to load the relevant name depending on language. So we're just going to add a comment for what this does, which is getting multilingual text. And we're basically going to do what we did with the links, but we're going to call this text. So just duplicate this function. Tab in the false. Change links to texts. And just change the, oops, missed out a symbol there. Change the columns we're accessing. So the ones we need for this are ID lang and text and ID link. So just trim off that last little bit. And this table is block link lang, so rename that. And then we're just going to ignore this last bit because it's not applicable with this table. And I'm just going to add a where statement, since this is going to be locating where there's text to a specific language, even though we're going to be returning a function with all different languages. So where ID link, the symbols again, integer, then we're going to reference the link variable. Whoops, it's not right. So we're going to use the information we just loaded previously, so that we know where to look exactly in this other table. So that bit's done. Now we just need to add the last little bit of code for dealing with the text array and split them into variables. And then once again put these into the result array. So we're going to be using a method of relying on the variable from the database query we just did to uniquely identify subarrays depending on language by each one having a prefix of text underscore and then the number that corresponds to the language. So ID lang, and that just equals, this is the part that holds the text. So obviously when we're referencing text for a certain language, we know this is exactly where it'll be. And then just the preceding number, which is in the wrong place actually. That needs to just go outside this function, since we're using a reference to I refreshing itself into an auto-incremented number for each time the links for each loop loops, not when the text loop loops. So just close that loop there, and once it's done loading all that information and organising it, I'm just going to return result. So if none of these have failed and stopped it from executing anymore with the return false, then we'll return the information from this function and should be just fine from there. So now we just need to add this into the display form function. So what we're going to do basically is add another field set, which adds just another one of these yellow boxes and we're going to fill that with the information from the get links query. So we're going to automate it. So we just need to add a field set similar to this, so we'll just copy it. And we're just going to do a links equals this, which is referencing our class, so we know we're accessing all the functions in this page if we add this before we reference function. So this get links, and we don't need to pass it any information because it doesn't need any, because it's just loading information by bulk. And we're just going to add a for each loop. So for each links as link, and we're going to use this HTML, which adds HTML to your module page. Dot equals, so we're not erasing any information that's already in that variable, we're just adding on to it. And we're just going to add a paragraph for each different link. So we'll just arrange the information on different lines as well for each link, followed by, we're arranging them by each column. So first we have link ID, then I'm just going to add a line break, then the link URL, another line break, link new window, and then the final paragraph tag, the ending tag. And that should be fine. And we just need to add the last closing field set tag so it formats properly. And that should be it. So just before we test this, earlier you saw that I deleted all the information already in the module so we could start from scratch. So we just need to go into the block link module. We've got an error. Right. This will just be some bad coding that needs fixing, so probably a spelling error. So I'm just going to assume this is being caused by no information being in the block link module. So I'm just going to insert some information into there, which is here. So add some text. Let's just do YouTube. Add this link. Yeah, still there. I've just spotted what it is. It's the missing dot that was on the BB instance. So just need the two colons to reference a class and then the function without having the class initialized. So hopefully this should work now. Yep. So I did think it were a bit unusual that it would work without the information, but you can see if we look back at code that this information that we added previously has been read out. So if we just go back to MAMP, so we can see the ID link, the URL, new window, we've got one result with 8, YouTube and 0, which I typed in earlier, and it's showing up here. So that's the first function of the for done. So I'm going to leave it at there since this has run on for longer than I thought, and I'm going to follow this up by adding a longer list of parts for this tutorial, and be covering them as individual parts for these different functions. So it might be a longer wait, but at least they'll get done.